Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for coming along, because I know it's normally your field trip time now, but we've kind of got a virtual field trip today. So our virtual field trip to Polman's nursery, and Andy O'Brien, who looks after the innovation and a lot of the tours and things too, don't you?
Yeah.
Has come to have a chat with us, so I know he's got lots of videos and things to show you in his presentation about Polman's. So you can ask Andy as he goes along questions if you like. And I think we expect an awful lot of Andy, because Polman's is a really big place, and I'm sure Andy will tell you about that. But considering that he has to have pretty much everything in his head, we're expecting a lot of him, so he might not be able to answer all the questions, but I'm sure he'll try. Because I know I often ask him things that he really thinks, I just don't know all those details, and how can you when something so big and there's just so many processes all the way along. And what we see, just the plant production side, Andy probably knows a lot more of the other parts as well. He's probably thinking of other aspects to do with the business, and maybe you'll let us know what those are too. So we're really grateful for Andy to come along. He's brought some props, so he'll explain those along the way. So enjoy your chat, and don't forget to ask questions along the way.
Yeah.
All right, thanks a lot.
No worries. Thanks for having me along. Polman's Nursery, for anyone who doesn't know, we're located not far from here, about 5 kilometres over on Redbank Creek Road. So started in 1976 by John and Val Polman, originally growing tomato seedlings for farmers, and over the years branched out into the ornamental space and then vegetable flower seedlings and things for home consumers. So we don't grow for farmers anymore. We are solely a wholesaler selling into the retail space. So started very small. We now cover about 20 hectares all up of crop, intensive horticulture production. You can see my little gimmick of insert greenhouse here. That's our new propagation house. You'll see a bit more of that later on. We need some new aerial photos. So 60 hectares total across the property. About 8 million plants a year that we sell, and we deliver on our own trucks. We deliver from about Newcastle in New South Wales to pretty much all of North Queensland and west, as far as there's people who want to buy plants. So we deliver twice weekly to most customers and once a week to some others.
So Andy, while you've got that picture up,
yeah.
Can you just explain sort of where roughly things are?
Yeah. Do I have a point? I do. Cool. So up here, hidden under the trees, is our retail nursery, where the public can buy our product, and from our factory outlet as well. So anything that doesn't quite make the grade, we sell through there. And our indoor shade houses as well, up here for indoor foliage. And then we move into our seedling area. So potted herbs, flower and vegetable seedlings, small packs, and those sorts of things. We grow our own plugs. So the tray in front of Robin there, we seed and grow our own, and then that goes through our transplanting machine or is potted into a larger container. We have our potted colour area here and up here as well. As the name suggests, pots of colour. Pretty self-explanatory, I think. Moving to tree and shrub here, so Australian natives, trees, different climbers and things like that. And in here now is our new propagation house, where we take unrooted cuttings to produce plants for the rest of the nursery as well. In our peak times, I think 230 people this year was our peak. We run about 140 permanent full-time staff, and we ramp up for our spring and autumn peaks with seasonal labour and backpackers. Got a little video. It's just a promotional video that was done talked a little bit about our range already, but so our seedling and herb area, we grow a lot of flowers and vegetables in different sizes, punnets and packs and things, and the potted herbs as well. So an example is our sleeved herbs into Coles and Woolies basically. So you'll see them in the fresh produce section, sold as you know, ready to eat fresh produce. And just a quick example I grabbed of our seedling range, just some lettuce, you know, for the home gardener to grab and to grow at home.
So for the ones that are being sold as edibles, do you need to treat those differently because people are potentially just going to eat them?
Yes, yeah, that's right. So they're treated as a fresh produce product. So what we can, you know, if we've had to spray for a problem, yeah, it's very limited in what you can apply to a herb. So that's all accredited under Fresh Care certification. So we're audited every year by Fresh Care, looking at our records, our pathogen testing, our water testing. So we're doing monthly tests for E. coli, salmonella, all of those things. Yeah, so it is a food safe product sold in, whereas the other things are, you know, to take home and grow and eat them at a later date.
So do you consider that being a fairly risky product, the one that you go straight on the supermarket?
It has some risk. We don't treat things too differently. We've gone, and I'll talk a bit about it later, we've gone down an integrated pest management approach. So we're using beneficial insects across the nursery. We don't use you know, the old school horrible chemicals anymore. So essentially what we can apply to a basil is the same as what's getting applied anyway to the lettuce and things. So yeah, there's really no difference in how we treat it. We just have to be conscious and careful that what we apply is legal and registered, and withholding periods and things get tricky.
Something going wrong if you're not having that chemical in you.
Yes, yeah, that's right. You know, we've consciously removed a lot of those old products over the last 10 years. Just they don't work for one, and you know, you get resistance issues with insects and all of those. But just moving to the modern chemicals if you need them. But foremost is beneficial insects, biological products, fungicides, bioinsecticides doing the work for you instead. Potted colour, a huge range. I should have mentioned over the whole nursery we produce about 1,200 different varieties. Probably 300 or 400 different species, and then within those ranges, you know, we probably have 15 different petunias, so it adds up pretty quick. But you know, in potted colour, perennials, annuals, all that sort of thing. We do well over 100,000 roses a year, 80,000 hibiscus, 100,000 lavender. It just adds up when you produce them every week of the year. Indoor foliage. The market, oddly enough, has really saturated. 5 to 6 years ago, we couldn't keep up with indoor foliage. There was a real boom with people growing plants in their home, and we went from about 300,000 pots a year to around 1 million pots a year just in indoor foliage, and that over time other growers have come into the market and taken some of that share back. So we're sort of seeing that soften again, which is quite interesting when we just could not keep up for about 3 years. We couldn't grow enough. And in our facilities, you know, they're just shade houses, so we are limited in winter with what we can do here. So for a while we had a contract grower in Cairns to do our winter production. We'd actually ship young plants up to Cairns, get them grown, bring them back. So incredible cost, but it kept us in the market. So it wasn't very profitable, but it kept plants on the shelf under our brand.
And so you're also looking for new products, aren't you? Like this rather curly-looking fern.
Yeah, that's a bird's nest fern essentially, but it's called hurricane. We've had that one for a few years now, but our sales and production managers will travel to Europe and America and other places each year and meet with the breeding companies and see what's new and what's coming. And then we trial things here ourselves as well. So we'll look at the new varieties and compare them with what we're currently growing and see whether they are better, whether they perform better in a Queensland environment. So we trial that to ensure that what we bring into the market is actually going to survive for consumers in, say, New South Wales and Queensland, where our key customer base is. Something might grow great in Melbourne, but the heat and humidity of summer here might just melt it. So we make sure we trial before we introduce, and it has to be better than what we're currently doing. Otherwise, we don't introduce. But constantly changing. You know, even the pansy pot at the front there, you know, that variety may be different to what we were producing 12 months ago. The product at the end is the same or similar, but we have changed because of how it grows or how fast it grows or its flower or its longevity, compactness. So we're always sort of evaluating those things. Trees and shrubs range, mostly Australian natives, different climates and things. Fairly basic facilities as such, open fields, some, you know, hail netting, shade netting for protection, but otherwise it's fairly exposed to the elements and the gods play a lot of part in hail, frost, floods, rain. We have to put up with all of that.
And do you tend to do that because I suppose you pay a lot more for a larger pot?
They tend to be slower as well, so you don't make as much margin on it because you have to hold it for longer to get it saleable. So per square metre, it becomes less feasible to put the investment in a greenhouse for it because you won't get the return on investment. And they'll handle, you know, they need full sun. They will handle the extremes better than a pansy will, you know. If we get 35 degrees in the next month, the pansies will be all cactus. So, but we'll be in and out of that market before then. So everything is scheduled for seasons and temperature, and so we'll grow our pansies through winter. Our production of pansies is already stopped, and now we're just selling the last batches out before it gets hot in Queensland, and then we move into other things like petunias and so it's constantly evolving based on seasons. Our production system, so in the seedling area, we actually mix our own growing media to our own specs, but we import coir and peat moss from overseas. Currently, that is a good mix that suits our conditions here. So our growing facilities, our Gatton climate, which you guys all know can be hot, cold. Yep.
So any material that is locally produced?
So pine bark is locally sourced in southeast Queensland. So that goes into any pots that we grow is all a pine bark based mix, all sourced in Queensland. There's no peat supply in Australia. And there's no coir industry either. So we're actively looking at alternatives. I've trialled some wood fibre, and that is made locally in Queensland as well as a component in this mix. So we'll take out a percentage of coir or peat and replace that with wood fibre. So early stage trials to see how that works. Some issues to overcome there. So we're definitely working on sustainable local alternatives. My office has 100 little bags in the corner of different pine barks, wood chips, wood fibre, coal ash, you name it, we've looked at it, sawdust, and we're sort of assessing all of these things that might be feasible, whether they work or not. But this is a very, very good growing media, for us ideally. If we didn't have to import it, that would be fantastic. So, watch this space. We'll see what we can come up with. Yep. Yes. Yep. Yeah. So we don't change. So that's where we have to compromise with certain plants. If we were a tomato grower, you would make a mix that is perfect for tomatoes, and you would do it well, all the time. You would know what you're doing. So we compromise on some things. So it's a standard mix. It removes changeover. It removes additional processes. It's more efficient, and it removes a risk that we might grow the wrong thing in the wrong mix and then it fails. Some crops don't like it as much and some perform really well, but it's just about compromise to that everything grows good, but if you change the mix to suit that particular plant, it would grow better for sure, but it needs to suit everything that we do in each area. So we have different pot mixes, for potted colour, for trees, for natives that don't like phosphorus. So we have about 5 different medias across the whole site that we do. But if you're in one area, then that's what's in it, and we sort of select the plants to suit, I guess, as well. So the peat bales go into the big red and blue Urban 80 bale muncher. So it just shaves peat moss off the top of each bale. The other is a mixer, so we blend peat, coir, bark, anything else we need to add, lime and things, other amendments if we want to adjust the pH of the mix, because it is variable depending on, each bale is variable. So we ask for a specification from the peat supplier that we want pH between, say, 5.8 and 6.2, but it can quite often be out of that range depending on how old it is, where it's come from, how long we've had it in storage. We're currently using bales that are about 12 months old, which isn't ideal, but in COVID you bought what you could, and we're still burning through that as we go. So we're constantly testing. We test every bale as it arrives, and we take 3 samples for every bale, take an average, and then we know that bale's good, that's not. If we get one that's out of spec, we might put it aside and not use it. If we have a whole batch out of spec, we'll go back to the supplier and say, this isn't good enough, what can you do? Can you supply us a new batch, or otherwise we'll just amend it ourselves to come up with what we need. Couple of little videos, but just shows the process of mixed media. So that's peat, coir, pine bark, some fertiliser, have some lime, all blended together to go up the conveyors, and then it goes to each individual line. So we've got seeding lines, 2 seeding lines, 2 transplanting lines, all automated for media. So when the hopper gets low, it calls for more media, it automatically sends it to which one needs it. And then the trays are all filled and levelled off, ready to go into seeded or transplanted, depending on which line it's on. It does it automatically. This is our punnet seeding. So you've got 3 foot trays. You've also made holes in the culvert. That sort of light cover on the top. That holds moisture, blocks light. Watered. They're ready to go off. So they get loaded on a bench and into germination. So we've got 2 germination chambers, 17-degree constant or 23-degree constant, depending on what each variety needs. So if it's a cool climate, you know, a winter veg or something will go to cool. Tomatoes and things, or your summer crops, they'll go to the warm chamber. It's constant heat, constant humidity, so you get the best uniform germination. And we, over many years, we know the timing. So just as a seed is about to germinate in that room, we'll take it out, move it into the production area, and then it'll grow on from there. But if we leave it in that space even a day or half a day too long, quite often the plant will stretch because it has not enough light, and it stretches looking for light, and that batch is ruined and we start again. Plug production, so we seed our own, and that sustains the majority of the potted colour and seedling production. So pretty much everything here, these are grown in plugs, so that's our style, and then it's transplanted. The lettuce would be direct seeded through the machine. Basil varies, but mostly direct seeded into that pot, and that's just grown as is. And then ferns and a lot of that stuff is propagated in our propagation house. You can see the 3 stages there. That's about a week apart in each picture. So probably the first picture may be 14 days old, about 20, and then say maybe 28 days, and ready for transplant or even beyond sort of transplant age in that instance. So they're all petunias. The rate of growth is pretty incredible for a lot of things. You see it 1 week, come back a few days later, and oh, is that the same plant? You know, they're pretty incredible. The transplanting machine, about 10 years old now, but what it does, it selects, so the little fingers come down and they take each individual plug out, and you can see where the blue bar is there that's lit up. It takes an image of each plant, and based on the specs that are set, if that plant either doesn't exist or it doesn't meet the specs, the planter actually rejects it. It transplants into the final container, and then it'll go back and fill in the gaps as well once it's done. So incredibly efficient. Does mean that the plugs we grow have to be really good germination, uniform quality, not too many misses, and just to make it as efficient as possible. And they have to be of a good size as well, so we can't be too small, can't be too big. So there's a lot of skill in the plug growers in that space to try and produce something that's perfect for this machine. Demand for homegrown veg, and this machine, we ran 2 shifts, 20 hours a day, and it didn't stop. It just went for months on end, trying to keep up with the demand. Had we not had it though, we would not have been even anywhere near able to keep up. So all of the facilities we've got means that we can ramp up, and then if sales slow down, we go into a drought, we can actually contract again. But as soon as we get a rain event or something, we can ramp up. And by having our own plugs in house, we can ramp up week to week. So sales are good this week. We anticipate nice weather. They're going to be good next week. We'll keep ramping and we'll chase sales with a little bit of risk that if it doesn't eventuate, you're going to throw it out at the end. But that's some of the risk of the business, which we do account for. A little bit simpler, the potting. So still potted by hand all of these. Can get robotic planters. Little range of different facilities. So the majority of stock, yeah, mate. No. Probably one technician for each of those machines in Australia. Yeah, we're lucky because for the transplanter, the technician's in Toowoomba. So we're very lucky, but we're probably their most frequent customer. So he services, Southeast Queensland, but does a range of other things as well, not just transplanters, but all of the conveyor lines and those sorts of things that if something goes wrong, we're lucky we can have him here in half a day or something to look at. Can be, yeah. They're mostly imported machines, so sometimes if the suppliers don't have it on the shelf, and generally most of it comes from Melbourne, we've got to wait to freight it. The best you might get is a couple of days on air freight. Otherwise, yeah, sometimes we're waiting weeks to get it from Italy or Europe or another part of Europe or Asia, wherever it comes from. So it can be definitely a struggle sometimes, and sometimes it's for all of the tech and what it can do, sometimes we don't. In some instances, we may not go down that path. It may be still more beneficial just to stick with people doing it by hand. Just for the investment at the front end and that whether you get the return or if it just causes too many issues down the track. Another question? Mostly Dutch, yeah. The transplanter is TTA is the brand. They do some amazing stuff with potting and transplanting machines. Some very cool videos out there if you search TTA and watch their machines do their work. Range of production facilities. So, as I mentioned, most of the areas in the nursery are up on rolling benches, particularly the largest areas, seedlings, potted colour. They're the biggest by volume and turn over far more plants than any other. So we've got a glass house. It's the only glass house we've actually got, built in the late 80s, I think. Still going well. And serves its purpose. It's heated in winter and we have shade, lights, we have plenty of tech in there, but very expensive. So if compared to retractable roof houses, they all serve their own purpose, but these ones are great for us in being able to open up, allow light in, plenty of sunlight. We like to not grow our plants under cover too much because they stretch, they go soft, so that you need that elevated light to help you keep a compact plant as well, and nice and tough for the home gardener. So We don't want our lettuce seedlings to go home to someone, they plant them out on a 30-degree day and they just wilt and don't recover. They're sun hardened, they're ready to go out in the sun from the nursery. They shouldn't go backwards before they start to grow.
I was saying to the students before this morning that sometimes people will have rather over-ambitious ideas and they'll buy lots of things from the nursery. And some things are just out of the nursery person's control because
Yeah.
they might leave them at the back door for 2 weeks and then they're not sun hardened anymore.
Yes,
They
yeah,
might leave
yep.
them in the car at 40 degrees on the way home
Yeah.
stuck in the supermarket.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
There's lots of things that must make it very hard.
It does. And I know myself, I take too much home and then forget about it. You don't water it. You instead of 1 punnet of lettuce, you take 3, and then all of a sudden you've got this massive glut of lettuce that you didn't need. So I'm getting smarter every year to plant 6 lettuce and another 6 in a month's time, and not 25 in one go. So, yeah. I talked a little bit about open field, shade net, hail net structures, no protection at all, totally exposed, incredibly hot in summer, cold in winter. That sunrise pic, I was actually there for frost control. It was about 0 degrees at the time. So we will run irrigation. If we get a frost, we will run irrigation to ensure that we melt that frost and continue melting that frost as the sun rises so we don't get plant damage from frost. And alternatively, in summer when it's really hot, we call it pulse watering, but we will run maybe 2 minutes of irrigation every half hour or every hour, depending how hot it is, just to cool the environment down. It's not to irrigate the plants, it's just to cool the environment. And we actually use less water in a day by doing that because the plants don't dry out in between waters. We're trying to get water back in when it's 38 degrees. It's not going to happen. But if we can get water in early morning and we just maintain it and we cool the environment where the plants are growing, they can transpire, they won't stress. So we've done a lot of work on that in the last 5 to 6 years and really got it down to an art now where we know how to keep things growing and not going into stress in those extreme days. I think I have a slide in here about extremes for climate. We use a lot of lighting for different things, but mostly is day extension, so just extending day length to induce flowering faster. The quicker we can make a snapdragon or a pansy or a petunia flower, the quicker we can sell it. So, for things that are sold with flowers, we will induce lighting from the plug stage and start initiating that flower and bud development. So by the time it's transplanted, it's already in flowering mode, and then it's only a matter of weeks before we're selling it. So these are LED lights. We've got a range, but we're transitioning over to all LEDs as we go, just for energy efficiency, mostly. Just to reduce our consumption and get away from the older style lights which use a lot of energy. Interestingly, night interruption lighting was something we found quite a few years ago, but basil downy mildew came into Australia and we had a lot of issues with basil downy mildew initially in varieties that were very susceptible to it. So something we found though is that night interruption, so we turn the lights on for about half an hour in the middle of the night, it actually interrupts the fungal spores from developing and spreading. So it's been a very useful tool, along with new varieties that are resistant to it and things. We actually don't really have an issue with it anymore. But yeah, quite a challenge to overcome when it first came in. Came in on seed from overseas and went from there. So you can see some of the older lights there. In this this is in our glass house, so we have shade screens for summer. We can shade the plants, protect them from that extreme heat. And you can see the little black curtains there that are pulled back at the moment. They're actually blackout screens, so we can manipulate day length the other way. We can shorten day length. So you'll find it used a lot in cannabis production, where they shorten day length to induce flowering of cannabis. Most of the controlled environment cannabis places will have lighting and blackout to do just that. We use it. That crop is poinsettias for Christmas. So in Australia, Christmas is summer. They traditionally turn red in winter in short days. So we have to grow them under lights to start the process. And then about 8 weeks out from when we want to sell them, we start blacking out and they turn red under short days. So we can actually have a crop out of season. So it's an advantage that we have in the market in that we can manipulate plants out of season. We can grow them totally out of season and sell them if the market wants them, or we can potentially be first to market and get an advantage there by using the facilities to shorten or lengthen day length. Our propagation house is our newest house. We've been in there almost 2 years now, about $4.5 million investment so far. Essentially the best you can get in the world for propagating environment. So you can... So the tubes under the benches are heating, so hydronic heating with hot water from a boiler. That runs to maintain around 20 degrees constant in that area for propagating. So plants in that area are all from unrooted cuttings. So we'll take a cutting from a mother stock plant that we're growing, or we'll buy cuttings from propagators, and most of those are in Melbourne, and get them shipped to us. We'll plant them and then they grow from there. So you can see the fog and mist environment. It's incredibly humid, but it's all to protect it from stress in that initial stage where it has no roots. So protect from stress, get the plant to start growing roots, and then create the best environment for propagating. All climate controlled. From software, we set the parameters, it just makes it happen. So we say what we want in terms of temperature, humidity, vapor pressure deficit and things, and it just does what we say. So we move through different stages in that house in the production side, where we high humidity, nice and warm in that first stage there, then less humidity, little bit cooler, not as warm. Plants will start producing roots and start growing, but we also stop babying them as much. So by the time they go to the rest of the nursery to get potted, they're not soft, they're hardened, ready to go, just like we do for everything else. I had, for something else I put together, this is just our sort of local climate extremes. Since 2017, we've seen the highest ever maximum temperature for Gatton at 45.7, second coldest minimum a year later. Last year in the floods, everyone who's been to UQ knows about the floods last year. Highest ever daily rainfall. We don't know what we had. Our rain gauge overflowed and we couldn't get to the nursery for 5 days. So our weather station measured for that period over 800 mils. Officially, the weather station for UQ Gatton turns off when it gets flooded and we get no records for several months. A station near Gatton measured 300 mils for the day. So we had a lot more than that, and we had major flood through the nursery at the the worst point, about 1 metre of water through. Even the transplant machine, that shed had nearly 1 metre of water through it. So, yeah. And the other extreme, in 2019, the horrible drought, their lowest ever annual rainfall as well. And then last year, our highest on record. So we're constantly battling all of these things. I guess our advantage over maybe conventional farming is that we've got some tools to mitigate the climate extremes. So the new propagation house is sort of our best environment in that sense, where we can maintain. And in the flood, we couldn't get there for 5 days. It just did its thing. We came back 5 days later and everything was alive, and it just ran itself for 5 days with really no human intervention. So we got lucky. We didn't lose too many plants in the flood, but also lucky because it stayed cloudy for several days. So we had the flood, we irrigated everything before the flood, but everything trapped inside. The risk is in a glasshouse situation, then if you can't get back in to irrigate soon after, once the sun comes out, you lose stock because it dies from drying out. So you just get flooded, but you lose your stock because you can't water it. So we got lucky. We had 3 or 4 days of cloud after the rain event. So the time we got back in, it was still okay. But we had no power initially. We had no pumps. Our pumps had all been underwater. So we had thankfully not the owner, because they had some very sleepless nights, I'm sure. Just another view of the house. Take note of how bright that is in there, and then look at the next one. You can see that the roof actually, so the shading level. So we use a drone to paint shade products on the roof from the outside. Used to be a human job, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody, to stand up in a glasshouse gutter to do that. So the drones have been a game changer. We just get contractors in. Yep. We don't. Like a lot of, I guess, your tomato growers or greenhouses in Europe, they'll put the shade product on for summer, and then they wash it off in winter because they need that extra light. Our light intensity here is that high that we don't mind a bit of extra shade even in winter. And if we get some good summer storms and things, it naturally just wears off. So we don't wash off, but you could, but we tend not to worry about it, because even in a sunny day like today, we'll be running our shades inside our houses anyway through the sort of middle part of the day, just to protect from that sort of intense light. But in other climates, in places that don't have as much light intensity as us, they're desperate for light. We're trying to repel it sometimes. A big part of what we do is on biosecurity, plant protection, traceability of our plants, particularly in the fresh herb space. Everything is tracked. So you can see the barcode there, and there's a barcode on that tray of marigolds as well. There would have been a batch card in each of the batches that the pots and things came from as well, but everything is individually identified, uniquely identified, and we can tell when it was produced, what it is, and also what it's going into and the quantity. So that, if you can read the little code under the barcode, 2233.2, which means it was produced last year, so 2022, in week 33 and on day 2. So everything's tracked back to the day of production, which helps us track our timings. We know how fast things are growing, how slow they're growing as well. We are Biosecure HACCP accredited. We were the first nursery in Australia to be given market access to trade interstate under Biosecure HACCP. It's basically a third-party certification scheme, so government recognised, but we are independently audited, keep our own records. We don't need government inspectors to inspect our stock before it goes into state. Because of that certification, we do it ourselves, and then we're audited twice a year on that. Any issues, we have to address them.
Is there anything new that you have to do with the fire ants?
My worst nightmare, fire ants. Yeah, it's scary, really scary for us. So at the moment, we're still outside 5 kilometres of the nearest known nest, which happens to be just over here. Yeah, so for us, if they've come within 5 kilometres, it adds a whole nother level of compliance issues that we have to meet. We are trying our hardest to come up with better solutions than mandatory chemical treatment of everything that is sent. So, yeah, we're trying to work with the fire ant program and the government to allow some new chemicals that may be suitable. And yeah, it's been a long process with very little progress, but we're trying. Yeah, so we don't want to go down the route of mandatory chemical treatment. Like that's to us, it's wrong. We use the IPM programs, we use the beneficial insects. The treatment options for fire ant control are terrible for that. They're bad for human health. Some of them have been banned in most of the world except for Australia. So yeah, it's something we don't want to do. We believe there's options out there with new chemistries and other products, but we need to bring the regulation into 2023 and not 20 years ago. So that's an ongoing fight for us.
Certified before they actually reach that 5 kg.
Yeah, it's so close to. It's very scary for us, and the extra impost and whether then we don't want to treat edible products with these things, and we may not even be allowed to. So for us, if that meant we wouldn't produce any edible food crops, and that's millions of dollars in lost production per year, and 30 to 40 jobs gone if that was how it eventuated. So
to grow them off the ground is not enough.
no, they either have to be covered or covered.
Like a full covered greenhouse, you mean?
Yeah. So they can't be grown outside uncovered without then some form of chemical treatment to be sold. So yeah.
So even when you retract the glass house for the greenhouse breeders, is that considered uncovered?
Potentially, yeah, but it's not clear. The regulation is vague. Whether it was deliberately vague, we don't know, but yeah, it's unclear. So it's not a happy space for anyone to try and operate in at the moment. The best thing for us is that we get fire ants in the Lockyer Valley under control and start marching them back towards Brisbane. And with a bit of luck, we could not enter the zones and have to go through these processes. Yeah. It would, if it keeps going west, then Withcott become affected, and shipping product. And every nursery in Brisbane has to be going through the issues. We're somewhat lucky. We're outside on the edge, so yeah, it's certainly probably our biggest concern right now in the business is that, and rightfully so. New South Wales are very, very nervous about getting fire ants into New South Wales from Queensland. They're within 5 kilometres of the border now. So, we absolutely want to see fire ants eradicated. We just would like some more tools to help us trade without harming our staff, our people, customers. That's where we want to get to. And just trying our hardest to work with the program and come up with some better options that they accept. Yeah, might be some research projects in it for UQ. Yes. Yeah. The biosecurity side of things is underpinned by good processes and good records. So crop monitoring, insect monitoring. We scrutinise everything that arrives from external suppliers, finding that the more we do ourselves in the new propagation house, the better it is. We're not inheriting issues from suppliers who maybe aren't supplying us with the best quality or things. So we'll give feedback back and try and get better with the suppliers, and hey, this cutting was too small and it died. This was too big and it wasn't good, or this had mites when it arrived. So trying to get everybody better, but eventually, if someone's consistently providing poor quality, we will just potentially drop that supplier and find it elsewhere. Our work on Biosecure HACCP program, we've been in the program, we're in their initial pilot programs. We've been in it since 2011. The work that we did setting up the pilot program and working with industry on that saw us win the Australian Biosecurity Award in 2021 for Farm Biosecurity Producer of the Year, just based on those processes we've got in place, quarantining and every vehicle that comes on site gets inspected, and particularly fire ants. That's the last thing we want a vehicle to bring in. So, really no access if it's not necessary, and just around high health plant production, so that we know what we produce is of good quality and good health, and it's safe as it goes out the door. We budget a certain amount every year to actually throw out. It's the nature of nursery production that if you don't sell certain things on time, you can't hold them. You can't hold a lettuce crop too long. It'll keep growing and eventually be too big for the consumer, poor quality, and all those issues. And for us, because we produce every week of the year, we've always got more stock coming up behind. So eventually, if it doesn't sell, we've got to dump that batch and move on to what's coming behind, so we don't get a snowball effect. And right now at the nursery, we are over full. So we need spring sales to really ramp up now so that we can keep producing. It's just a constant juggle while you're producing, that sales need to match production so that it keeps flowing. Otherwise we get gridlocked and we can't move anywhere. But the last 10 years at least, we've continually reduced our losses from pest and disease. So we budget a certain amount that we know we're going to lose because we didn't sell it, or pest and disease issues, but we are, consistently over the last few years losing less than 1% from pest and disease issues.
What are you doing with the dumps material?
Yeah, so all the dump material goes separated from the pot, obviously, just into composting. So we're still working out how to safely reuse it. So that's the ultimate game. I've done some trials, but it's composting, removing the pathogens and things, and then being able to safely reuse it back in the media. So yeah, we're working on it, but at the moment it's sort of just stockpiled. It's naturally composting itself. We just then need to refine the process and make sure that we're not introducing pathogens or anything, or weed seeds that probably have blown in there in that time. So fair bit of investment required if we're going to set up a composting business, essentially, just to run our own. But yeah, we've got some pretty good plans there. The pots, all of our plastics are recyclable, and any black plastic pots, when we only use black plastic pots now, they're a minimum 99% recycled material. So any pot or tray, nursery tray that we use, if it's damaged, we send it back to the manufacturers. They melt it down, make new pots, make new trays. There's a recycling scheme for pots up and running now. Early days, but there are like return points now that you can take pots back to. They'll go back to the manufacturers and get made into new pots. So it's starting to turn into a circular economy there, but not enough pots get recycled every year. I've heard an estimate of only 8% of pots that are sold come back for recycling. We know gardeners use them, they reuse them, people share, barter, so, you know, but I know myself, I had a stack of pots behind the shed, that sort of thing. That's just about getting them back and making sure they don't go into landfill, because they won't break down. But they are infinitely recyclable, so a pot can be remade into a pot forever. So, and it reduces the amount of virgin plastic that needs to come into Australia. So there's a certain amount already here. If they can just get it back to remanufacture it, we don't have to keep importing more resins and things. And coloured pots are actually made with virgin plastic. They're not recycled. They are recyclable, but they then cause issues in the remanufacturing process because of the dyes and things. So that's why we moved to solely black pots, because they are then recyclable and are the recycled material coming in as well. We use IPM approach. We release 3 different types of predatory mite onto air. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yes, could be. Yeah, there are Australian standards for composts and potting mixes, and yeah, absolutely right. If it's not composted properly, you introduce pathogens and things. So we would need to overcome all of that in order to be able to do it. You may not. Were you referring to maybe doing it on a small scale or at home, or you mean in a commercial sense? Yeah, on farm. The compost has to be really high quality as well for nursery stock. So we can't use general compost that is made for agriculture to put on farms, you know, because it needs to be consistent. So in Europe, there's some companies making compost from food waste, but only commercial kitchen vegetable scraps, essentially making high grade compost and using it in like a seedling media that we use. So it's definitely possible, but the compost quality has to be very high, and you can't have inconsistencies in what made the compost. Whereas if it was to go to agriculture, it'd be okay. The big composting guys down towards Ipswich, they'll tell you that they get everything in: trees, green waste, plastic, metal, whatever comes from the tip or wherever they get all of their green waste from. It's contaminated, and they have horrible problems getting all of that out of it. So we couldn't use that because we can't afford inconsistency within a cell. Yeah, yeah.
You can see that even just when you're buying potting mixes locally, you can tell that they've added compost to the potting mixes and garden soils. You get it home and you're pulling out bits of string and plastic, all kinds of stuff, and it's obvious who put them the wrong thing. And I just wish that maybe they'd been a bit more careful.
Don't buy cheap potting mix.
Yeah.
As people say they don't have a green thumb and they can't grow anything, it's usually the potting mix. It's not them at all.
Sorry, Andy. I do get a bit cheap. I go and buy the bulk stuff.
Yeah, that's probably
Yes,
all
when
right.
I go and buy bulk potting mix, that's when I get caught out. So you buy it by the
The
cubic meter.
shouldn't get soil nematodes in a potting medium. And soilless potting media shouldn't really get nematode, like, that grow, that live in the soil. So, we use beneficial nematodes for fungus gnat control. So we actually apply them to a lot of our crops, and they just live in the soil and they eat the larvae. Yeah, very useful tool.
So what were you going to say about the cheap potting mix?
Don't
you
buy
might
it.
have a different other stories.
I have from the horse's mouth of the manufacturer that $2 bags of potting mix are not even worth touching because it is the worst thing that is possible to go in a bag to look like potting mix. Nothing will grow in it. So Bunnings or Aldi want $2 bags of potting mix. The manufacturers will do whatever it takes to make sure they still make money producing it for $2 a bag. So it'll be ground up pellets and whatever else they can get their hands on to compost. And it'll be composted and everything and blended with other things, but it's cheap for a reason. So stick to the Australian standard and make sure there's two grades, there's a red standard and a black standard. I think the red one's the higher grade potting mix. So and some of the brands all come out of the same manufacturer. So it's just a different bag. Same product, different bag. Some of it's different price point for the same product, and other are cheap for a reason. So do avoid it because it may not be you who can't grow a plant. It's the fact that the media is terrible. Some of the beneficials that we use, so the Montarensis is a predatory mite we release every week. The other ones here, we hadn't released them, they're just naturally occurring. So the ladybirds coming in, eating the aphids. Cryptolemus turns into a beetle like a ladybird, very similar. That's the larval stage, and it actually eats mealybugs. So it looks like a mealybug, and a lot of people get it confused. They say we've got mealybugs. They've also got Cryptolemus cruising around eating the mealybugs. So very important to sort of identify both, because quite often you've got nature working for you anyway, and you don't need to come in with chemical option. And the ladybird larvae, that was actually outside my office window, and I watched this for a few weeks happen. But so the long slender ones are ladybird larvae, and then they go and pupate, is that the right word? But they curl up and then they develop into the adult and emerge as an adult ladybird. But that was one leaf where we had all of those stages at the same time. I thought that was quite incredible, but I was watching them from my office over a few weeks, and they were the juveniles actually eat aphids as well. So they're just cruising around that plant, eating aphids, and then they go and develop into the adults, and then they start eating aphids as well. So we've got a lot of nature working for us, which makes it more important to not just spray when you've got an issue or something like that. And we've done a lot of work ensuring that the chemicals that we do use are IPM friendly and don't hurt our beneficials. So 2018 we made the step to start introducing the beneficials across the whole nursery. So we were doing bits and pieces, different crops as we needed. We found that with western flower thrips coming in greater numbers into the area, we weren't controlling them. We weren't doing a very good job at all, to be honest. We were controlling adult thrips, but we were never controlling the larval stages as well. So a wholesale change for the business where we introduced beneficial mites to help us with that. The chart show you at the start of the chart the high number. That's where we were. I don't really have data prior to this that's reliable, but the really, really high number. Our thrips were off the chart in certain areas, particularly in the flowers. They're most attracted to that. But the crash around September is when we introduced, so there was that peak, then we introduced beneficials, and that crash, September, November in 2018, was the result of introducing those predatory mites every week into everything we do. So this is sticky trap data from the nursery. So we're recording pest numbers every week on the sticky traps. Use that as a tool to work out what our populations are and how many we need, what we need to do. So we may still spray. We get higher numbers of thrips. We'll come in and spray, but it's really dependent on the crop monitoring, what we find, and whether our beneficials are keeping up doing the job for us. If we find that the thrips or the mites are getting away from us, then we'll have to come in with different chemical options. But quite often we would want to use something that won't kill our beneficial mites so they can keep working in the background. And they work 24/7 too, so they're the best workers you can get. They don't ask for much. They just eat bugs and they're happy. A lot of work in my role. It's kind of morphed over the last few years from growing to R&D to also now sustainability. So looking a lot at our energy footprint, our water and our carbon emissions as well. So we've got 2 solar systems up and running now, with another 3 planned in the next 18 months, and they'll be significantly bigger systems than what we've already got, hopefully to cover the entire daytime usage for the nursery, and then over time, hopefully as battery technology gets cheaper and more affordable, we'll be able to utilise that to run our lighting and things at night as well. So we are a fairly large consumer of energy, but we are trying to continually reduce that with more efficient lighting and changing heating and new pump upgrades. So that's a recent pump upgrade there. Variable speed drive, constant pressure, constant demand pumps. So we have water on demand all the time around the nursery. So if someone turns on a valve and runs irrigation, the pumps will just kick in and maintain that pressure as they need to. That set replaced a set that was over 20 years old, similar thing, variable speed pumps, but we're already they're only 3 weeks old, and I'm already seeing energy efficiency. We're seeing better pumping, better pressure, better flow just by upgrading those pumps. But if we get 20 years out of these, we'll be very lucky. Incredibly efficient, also very expensive. So that's probably $130,000 there just in those. But we can't go without water, not even for a day. We've in pots and things. It's incredibly important that we can have reliable equipment, but also we can divert water to all the different divisions of the nursery if we need to. So each division is separate, so they all run their own pump stations, kind of for security and safety as well. But if we need to, pump station goes down, or water main breaks, we've got backups. So incredibly important. The dams, we have 2 dams we recycle to. So all of our production areas are lined. They're either plastic lined underneath with gravel, or there's drainage pipes under there. We capture all of our runoff back into the dams, and then we treat it and we reuse it. Incredibly important to do that, particularly at the moment with full dams, that we use the dams while we've got the water there before it just evaporates. And we've got an incredibly good groundwater source underneath us, which provides the majority of our water, but we'll preserve that for the drought. Semi-automated, so we still have to, the growers still assess if it needs water or not. So we still run by irrigation controllers. We can set a program. In summertime, we'll set the water to run at 5 a.m. So the water, it's all done before someone comes. So semi-automatic, but it's still reliant on a person to assess the crop and say, yes, it needs water. No, it doesn't need water. We've got rain sensors and things. So if it rains overnight, it'll turn the water off and not run. So we're not wasting water when it's unnecessary if we had enough rain. Standards. Yes, sort of, but mostly we know from experience that majority of our crops need water every day. So the medias that we use dry out quite rapidly, but that's deliberate in our sense, because if they stay too wet, we'll end up with root disease issues. So very free draining mixtures for that reason. But we also use the tray, the water saver tray. So I won't pick it up because I've got a small water that's in there, but the little well at the bottom of that tray, so all our pots go in those, and it holds a little bit of water in the bottom so that it doesn't freely drain out. It holds a little well there, and the plant can then, the capillary action will bring it back up into the pot. So certain crops, though, we have the same tray with a hole in the bottom. We don't want that water to sit around, so we've got that option for crops that don't like to sit wet. Heavy water users, we will make sure they're in that tray. We can. Our water is very clean. Our groundwater is very pure, so we're very lucky in that sense. But you do get algae growing in pipes and things, so from time to time we might get algae, more so blocking sprinklers and things. That's probably the biggest issue with it. It doesn't really cause issues. Our recycled dam water is chlorinated, so we kill off all the pathogens. Any algae after that process that's in the pipe network doesn't cause any issues. Talked a little bit about the pot sustainability already, but everything's polypropylene or the other. So PP5 is what the recycling scheme is based on. So pots and trays, they're all PP5. You can look for the little triangle on anything, and like the plug trays and things, they're a different type of plastic, but also now recyclable. Previously they weren't, so only in the last maybe 2 years, one of the largest manufacturers in the country has started taking them back because they've worked out how to recycle them and manufacture them into trays again. So we were trying to phase them out to go to P5 reusable trays. We may now have the option to continue using the same tray because it is recyclable. So we report to APCO, which is the Australian Packaging Covenant organisation, on our plastics and packaging use each year. So for us, it's about how much recycled material we have in our packaging, its recyclability, how much plastic we use, cardboard we use, any problematic, single-use plastics. Technically those trays were a single-use plastic, so we were trying to phase them out. Now we may end up keeping that tray, and means we don't need to look at our configurations of our machinery and things as well. So it's hopefully all progressing in the right direction in that sense. But we've also reduced our waste to landfill. So we actually purchased our own garbage truck about 3 years ago. It was far more cost effective for us to take our own waste to the tip than it was to have someone else collect it. But the beauty of that is we actually know exactly how much we send to landfill because we get a weighbridge in every time. So we know from that data, previously we didn't get data. You just got your bins collected, you paid $90 a bin or whatever every week, and you had no idea how much you were actually sending to landfill. So now we know exactly how much, and we've actually reduced by about 50% in the last 2 years by being hard on what people put in the bins. And we have plastic recycling, we have cardboard. Now, we've always had cardboard recycling, but paper recycling, some of the problematic plastics, pallet wrapping and things, we have recycler taking that now. Polystyrene boxes that we receive our cuttings in, we hate them, but we keep receiving them. So we're working on packaging for that. I've got some cardboard box trials. I've tried another seafood box to get our suppliers supplying it to us in a better form that's not something that is going to end up in landfill potentially. But we're recycling those as well. As much as we hate them, at least we can recycle them now. Next steps for us in transport, we're actively looking at whether hydrogen or electric trucks are going to be the main, transport type in the country. So we may go, if hydrogen doesn't take off soon, we'll probably go to electric trucks very soon in our next sort of round. So currently all diesel trucks, but as electric trucks get better and better range, we'll probably start replacing those and then look at what happens with hydrogen. There's potential that businesses or farms may even be able to produce their own hydrogen from water. So for us, that'd be fantastic. We've, at the moment, got plenty of water, so we could be making our own fuel as well. And replacing all the other sort of nursery vehicles, tractors and gators and things. We've got a couple of EVs, but just sort of every year is replacing a petrol or diesel vehicle with an electric, and that'll tie into our solar plans as well, so that we're energy sufficient, but also charging our own vehicles on site from free energy. And Rob Pullman, the managing director, he's got a vision that he'll have vehicle chargers in the retail car park for customers and chargers in the staff car park for staff in hopefully the near future. So, we touched a little on growing media too, the sustainable local alternatives, with your wood fibre and all these other things that we're looking at to get away from importing goods from overseas. That, ultimately, if we can stop that, that'd be great. We just need to find an alternative product that performs as well as the peat mix that we use in our seedling production. So the pots can be less of a challenge, they're more forgiving, and we can probably sub in some other components there quite easily. But pine bark's essentially a waste product from the sawmill industry anyway. There's mountains of it in southeast Queensland from the pine forestry, so essentially pine bark already is a sustainable, renewable product that the nursery industry's been utilising for decades. So there's probably not a huge need to change in that space, but we've got some interesting ideas that we're looking at. So we might be talking here in 12 months with some changes. We'll see what happens. I think this is my last slide, but another part of what we've got in our little part of the world, 200 hectares or so. I don't know, is that blurry up there? There is a koala in the tree. So we've got a reasonable population of koalas in our native vegetation. We're trying to do more to sort of protect that. There's land clearing not far from us for new housing and things, and we actually think we've seen an increase in koalas at our end because of the clearing in their habitat loss not far from us. So the family made a decision 2-3 years ago to buy the neighbouring property. So we actually now have a secure boundary for the nursery business, which makes sense. We can't be encroached. We can't have houses built near us. We operate 7 days a week. Our trucks leave at 3 a.m. We have lights. We spray chemicals. We don't use anything nasty, but we still spray chemicals. And you only need to put on a dust mask and a pair of gloves and go and spray something, and people go, "Wow, what are you doing?" It could be water, but you could scare people so easily because of that vision of what you're doing. So we've got a secure boundary, but also some plans there to revegetate parts of it and get some better corridors for the koalas to move around and not be vulnerable if they're trying to go from A to B across open paddocks and things. So, we're pretty proud of what we've got there with them. And they've been there for forever, and they're still around. So we're obviously doing something right, and they haven't moved on. The bottom picture's a pretty significant Melaleuca wetland that we have. It's regionally significant. It's the furthest west of its type of wetland in southeast Queensland, and the rest of them are all about 60 k's east towards the coast. So it would have been much bigger pre-land clearing. When you look at the surrounding environment, you can see where it extended to, but that's all been cleared and turned into cattle grazing and houses and different things. But we've got that one little pocket. We've had now ownership now for about 3 years. Suffered terribly in 2019 drought, and we didn't own it then, so we couldn't do anything about it. But that's it last year in the floods, after the floods, still full of water and life, and the large Melaleucas that were lost in the drought are being replaced by millions of tiny Melaleucas that are starting to grow. So we've got some advice out of Land for Wildlife and things on how to best look after it, and also what native plants are in there, what's a weed, what should we get rid of, and how do we best sort of maintain that so that it doesn't disappear and it doesn't suffer in the next drought as well. It's very, very cool and very interesting, and essentially no one knows it's there either. No. So people know it's there. It's mapped on state mapping and things. It has been identified, but it's just something that people drive past every day, and you wouldn't even pay attention to it really, unless you know what's there. So that was all I had. But if you are looking for part-time work, do send some details off to the careers website email address. We can, from time to time, or we do fit in with class schedules and things. Weekend work in our growing team. We have a team of growers who do weekends and public holidays, so it does suit students sometimes who can study during the week and then do their work on the weekends. So it's not for everyone, but if you're interested, express your interest. And there may not be anything, but you never know. And right now we're heading into our spring peak, so the divisions might all be looking for workers. So I can't guarantee anything, but please, if you're interested, do throw your hat in the ring. I've got nothing else, Robin, but questions happy to take.
So, my experience with the greenhouse automation is that, transplanting machine or automation, watering automation. Theoretically, they're just machines, but if you just hire some engineer, they're actually, they might just learn and fix themselves. But the thing is, depending on some companies,
don't know the exact details of everything that we have in that sense, but you're right. And there's certain things we will fix ourselves, and we've got a maintenance team who will fix things that break. But yeah, sometimes I guess it's out of their skill set, but it's not something that we need to have someone who knows what they're doing, as long as we can have a technician nearby, if that makes sense. Sustainable pots. Yep. Yep.
You said had pots made out of natural fibres.
Yeah. 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 We have tried them, and they do. The issues we've had with them is transport. They're not rigid enough to survive road transport. They break down. Some, for longer term crops, they can break down too fast before sale. So then at the consumer end, they don't get longevity of product, because the pot starts to break down. Um, there are some nurseries. I know of a nursery in Victoria, I think it's Victoria, who produces solely in coir pots. Quite a small nursery, probably no automation like we do, but all of these things are designed to be universal in the machinery, in the production lines. Those trays all fit our benches as well. So a lot of that work is actually being driven by us many years ago as one of the largest nurseries. Probably the R&D investment back then to get a water saver tray designed and built. The pot designs, just out of interest, the pot design. The holes are in the bottom. Some pots don't have that, or the holes are raised in the middle. When that sits in this tray, the water can't go up through the capillary action. So the hole locations and just little things that aren't necessarily maybe thought of, but over 47 years of business, these little issues have been overcome. The plug trays fit perfectly. We know exactly how many trays of pots and how many pots fit on a bench, and it's all uniform. So it's a lot of investment. There'd be a lot of investment to change, and I guess we would, at least at the moment, we'd need to import those pots made overseas, and not locally produced in Australia. So yeah, we've certainly looked at it, and I guess the more I've learnt about pot production and plastics in Australia over the last few years, as much as I don't like plastic in general, it probably is the most sustainable option at the moment until something much better comes out for what we do. So there are definitely options for new nurseries. Retrofitting what we do is very difficult. So I mentioned this morning to a group, if anyone knows of Boomeroo Nurseries at Southbrook, use a lot of the same houses, bench sizing technology that we use. The seeding machine is the same, but they invested, when they built the nursery, in automated moving. So the nursery moves the benches for them. For us to retrofit that into our system would just be far too costly. You'd need to start again to do that, and the level investment would be too high. So there's things we'd love to do that we can't, things that just aren't feasible, and then things that just don't work when you grow 1,200 different things. It's better when you're growing large runs of the doesn't necessarily work for us. Yeah. Again, it's just each business would have to review, you know, investigate what could work and what doesn't work.
Is there any non-chemical way to control this? That it's pretty prevalent in what's going on.
Can be, yeah. We see some powdery mildew. We're using some less chemical options, still a spray, but and it's been around forever. Phosphonic acid. I know of home gardeners using milk. Um, Not something we could use in the nursery sense, but there are, and I'm trying to think. I know there's some other, definitely are other things that are not a conventional chemical. I just can't think of them right now, but there are even nematodes being used in Europe. We haven't got them in Australia yet, but nematodes that can be sprayed on for caterpillar control. So the nematodes will live on the leaf and then infect the caterpillar. That's style of thing. There's a lot happening in the biological space. Yeah, we use mycorrhizal fungi to colonise insect larvae in the media. We've seen the advantage of doing that. We use beneficial bacteria and other fungi to control pest and disease as well, and for better plant growth. And we use pretty much everything we produce gets those bacteria, fungi, and an organic liquid fert with lots of goodies in it. So we use the conventional controlled release fertilizers, but we also use organic stuff and kelp products and all these things, bacteria, fungi. So yeah, you name it, we're looking at it and we use a lot of it, and it works. Yep. Mites. Yeah. Yeah, red spider mites, two-spotted mite. The beneficial mites is our main way of controlling mites in our crops. So they will just eat two-spotted mites, and so at least two of the ones that we release every week will eat mites, other mites. And then there's another one you may have heard of, Persimilus. It's a predatory mite that only eats two-spotted mite, and that is they are like voracious predators. We've done trials with them into heavily infested roses, and we've been trialing sort of dosage rates and release Persimilus mites into heavily infested roses, and within 3 days there's not a mite left. They eat everything and then they move on. If there's no mites there, they go searching for other mites to eat, or they die. But they can absolutely clean up a crop in days. Yeah. Chemical options are incredibly hard for mites. There's probably some quite good chemical options, but very expensive. And then a lot of the older things that have been used for mites are just becoming less effective, with resistance issues and things. For the home garden, I would be trying some beneficial mites. So you can buy them from Bugs for Bugs or Biological Services in small quantities. establish a population in your garden and see what happens. And I find it at home, I don't really use anything other. I don't use much at all, to be honest, at home. But just white oil or neem oil as a more of a physical, the oils they coat the insect and kill it that way rather than through any sort of nerve action or anything. So it's fairly safe and somewhat organic, I suppose, rather than a chemical option that may not even work as well. If you can buy it from Bunnings or the supermarket or somewhere, it's probably not going to be as effective as trying some predatory mites or something like that. That's okay. Not a problem. Yeah, yeah, we did. We did gain a few last year, I think. So yeah, and some still with us. Yep. I will. Maybe I'll try and do that now.
It's only to put on the blackboard.